The first snowflakes of December had just started to fall, blanketing my small town in a perfect festive lie. My name is Mia Wilson, and I've always been the dependable one, the baker, the good daughter. But as I stood hidden in the shadows of my childhood home, I overheard the secret that would shatter my life. My parents and my golden boy brother were selling my inheritance, my grandmother's prized mill house, to cover his debts. They were stealing my future, right under the glow of the Christmas tree. My family thought I was weak, but they underestimated the one thing I had left: the truth. Stay with me to see how this holiday turned into a war. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The first snowflakes of December had started to fall, big, lazy flakes that turned the main street of Harmony Creek into a living snow globe. Outside the fogged-up windows of my bakery, the daily grind. The town's Christmas lights were just starting to blink on, casting a warm, festive glow that felt like a lie. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of gingerbread and espresso, and the holiday rush was in full swing. I wiped a stray bit of flour from my cheek, catching my reflection in the polished steel of the espresso machine. Mia Wilson, 28 years old, owner baker and chief bottle washer, running on 3 hours of sleep and pure, unadulterated caffeine. This shop was my life, built from the ground up with my own 2 hands and the inheritance my grandmother had left me. I was independent, I was resilient, and I was at this precise moment incredibly tired. My phone buzzed on the counter for the 4th time. My mother, Helen. I ignored it, sliding a tray of iced sugar cookies into the display case. I knew what she wanted. I was already late for our family's annual start of the season dinner, an event my parents held on the first weekend of December, like a mandatory declaration of holiday cheer. Another buzz. I finally sighed, pulling off my apron. Juggling my family's expectations with the reality of running a small business during its peak season was a special kind of holiday torture. My parents, Helen and Richard Wilson, were the picture of small-town warmth, but that warmth always seemed to burn a little brighter for my older brother, Lucas. Lucas, in his mid-30s, was a man who moved through life with the charming, unearned confidence of someone who'd never had a door closed in his face. He was the golden boy, and I was the dependable one. When I finally pulled up to my parents' house, the one I grew up in, every window was ablaze with light. It looked like a Christmas card, perfect and welcoming. Lucas's flashy new SUV was parked arrogantly in the driveway, forcing me to park on the street. Inside, the illusion of warmth continued. My father clapped me on the shoulder, smelling of expensive aftershave, and my mother kissed the air near my cheek, her eyes already scanning past me toward Lucas, who was holding court by the fireplace. "Mia, darling, you made it," she said, her voice a practiced socialite's melody. "Lucas was just telling us about his new venture. It sounds so exciting." I forced a smile. "I'm sure it is." Lucas's ventures were a revolving door of bad ideas, funded by our parents' seemingly endless support. His last one, a boutique crypto consulting firm, had imploded in 6 months. Now he was supposedly getting into artisanal real estate. I was immediately put to work, tasked with finding the good angel ornaments for the tree, while Lucas sipped a whiskey and charmed our mother. "They're in the attic." "Honey," Mom called out in the blue bin marked sentimental. I navigated past the perfectly set dining table, the air thick with the smell of roasting turkey. A weird choice for December, but Mom loved the tradition. The attic door was in the upstairs hallway. As I pulled the cord for the folding stairs, I heard their voices drift up from the study just below the landing. They must have moved in there for privacy. Their voices were low, conspiratorial. I paused, my hand on the wobbly wooden ladder, absolutely certain she doesn't know. That was Lucas, his usual breezy charm replaced with a sharp, calculating edge. "It's cleaner this way. Mia gets emotional about Grandma's things." My blood went cold. "She'll understand eventually," my father's voice. Richard, usually so jovial, was thin and nervous. "It's for the family, Lucas. This investment. It's what's best for everyone." Then my mother. Her voice was the worst. It was firm, decisive, and utterly cold. "It's not just for the family, dear, it's for your future. That property has been sitting dormant for years. Your grandmother would want us to be practical. Selling it now gives you the capital you need. Mia doesn't need it. She has her little shop." A choked sound, half laugh, half sob, caught in my throat. Her little shop. The property they were talking about. It wasn't just any property. It was the old mill house on the edge of town. The one my grandmother had taught me to bake in. The one she had promised me, the one her will had supposedly protected. It was my backup plan, my dream, the place I was going to expand the daily grind into when I was finally ready. And they were selling it. They were selling it without telling me to fund another one of Lucas's failures. The shock was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I sank down onto the top step of the attic ladder, hidden in the shadows of the hallway. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful, frantic beat. Downstairs, I could hear the faint sound of a Bing Crosby carol starting up. Family. Gratitude. Togetherness. It was all a performance. The holiday lights, the smell of the turkey, the warm smiles, it was a façade, a beautifully decorated stage for their lies. My hands were trembling so violently, I had to clench them into fists. The anger was a hot, bitter flood right behind the initial wave of heartbreak. They thought I was just emotional. They thought I would just understand. They thought they could steal my grandmother's legacy from right under my nose. I sat there frozen in the cold draft of the attic and listened as they moved back to the living room, their laughter floating up the stairs, cheerful and bright. I realized with chilling clarity that my family's warmth was a weapon, and I'd been naive enough to mistake it for love. The question wasn't if I would confront them. The question was when and how. I took a deep, shuddering breath, pushed the anger down, and carefully, quietly folded the attic stairs back into the ceiling. It was time to join the party. The next few days were a blur of fake smiles and internal panic. Every time my mother Helen looked at me with that gentle, passive affection, or my father Richard asked if I wanted another slice of pie, I felt the sharp sting of the betrayal all over again. The question of confrontation was a constant, vicious knot in my stomach. Should I march back over there and expose them? Ruin Christmas? Ruin the family forever? Or was I simply overreacting to a harsh reality? Maybe Lucas did need the money more. Maybe I was being selfish. The guilt, that familiar heavy blanket woven by years of subtle favoritism, tried to smother my anger. But then I would think of Grandma, of her laugh echoing in that dusty mill house, the only property she refused to sell specifically to keep it safe for me. And the anger would surge back clean and furious. I wasn't fighting for a piece of real estate. I was fighting for her legacy and my own self-respect. I decided waiting was the smarter move. I needed facts, not just overheard whispers. I needed to move from shock to calculated action. My first step was discreet investigation. Lucas was always careless. I started by checking public records. A simple property search confirmed my deepest fear. The mill house, officially owned by the Wilson Family Trust, had been appraised aggressively low and was currently marked as pending sale under a limited liability company I didn't recognize. This wasn't just a deal, it was a rushed, underhanded transaction. I realized I needed a better vantage point, something Lucas wouldn't anticipate. My brother was technologically incompetent, but he loved showing off. I recalled seeing him use the family's shared cloud storage for his business documents, convinced it was secure. I knew the password. It was the name of the family dog from when we were kids. It took me a tense hour late one night, sitting at my bakery desk, the only light coming from my laptop screen. And there it was, a folder marked Millhouse Deal. The evidence was damning. Emails outlining the strategy to keep me out of the loop until closing. The contracts showing Lucas and my parents had signed off on the sale to an offshore shell company, which with a quick cross-reference I realized was subtly tied back to a holding group owned by one of Lucas's old shady business partners. Even worse, there were testimonies not from family, but from a few old friends of Grandma's in the community. Lucas had been pressuring them, trying to get them to sign affidavits claiming the mill house was dilapidated and an eyesore, essentially undermining the property's value to justify the low price. It wasn't just betrayal, it was active manipulation. My only ally was Zoe, my best friend, and the most dependable barista in Harmony Creek. She noticed the dark circles under my eyes and the unnatural tension in my jaw. When I finally broke down and showed her the file on my phone one slow afternoon, Zoe didn't flinch. Her dark eyes hardened. "Mia," she said, leaning across the stainless steel counter, her voice low and fierce. "You are not overreacting. They are trying to steal your lifeblood. You have to fight this. You deserve justice, and Grandma deserves her wishes respected." Her encouragement was the validation I desperately needed. She wasn't just my friend. She was my moral compass, reminding me that defending myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. The only obstacle was Lucas himself. He hadn't noticed my investigation, but he did notice my growing distance. He started making more appearances at my shop, playing the part of the successful older brother. He would loudly greet customers, charm the regulars, and talk about how he was helping Mom and Dad with their investments. It was an elaborate performance to solidify his reputation and dismiss any whispers of trouble before they started. He was suave and manipulative, laying a groundwork of respectability to counter whatever I might eventually say. But Lucas's performance only fed my character growth. I started asserting myself not just with him, but with my parents. When my mother called to complain I hadn't RSVP'd to a party thrown by her bridge club, I didn't apologize. "I'm working, Mom. My business comes first right now." My voice was level, almost cold. The old Mia would have scrambled to please her. This new Mia, the one who saw the contracts and the lies, was refusing to let family loyalty blind her judgment. I realized that I had the right to defend myself and my grandmother's legacy. This wasn't about spite. It was about defining my own freedom. The escalation came at the annual Wilson family lights, viewing a casual holiday gathering held at Uncle David's house. Lucas, holding a glass of expensive champagne, was mid-story talking about how a friend of his had made a killing in property development. I walked up, holding my cup of tepid cider, and smiled sweetly. "That's fascinating, Lucas. Are you talking about the kind of development that requires pressuring elderly community members to sign documents they don't fully understand? Or the kind that involves secret deals and shell companies?" The conversation froze. Lucas's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of pure shocked menace. My parents across the room looked suddenly pale. "Mia, what is that supposed to mean?" Lucas asked, his voice low and tight, but the public stage forced him to keep the volume down. "It means," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on his, "that I've been doing my homework. Some of us still believe in transparency, Lucas, especially when family assets are involved." The air crackled. The small cracks in my parents' allegiance widened. They were watching us, terrified of the scene I was creating. Lucas straightened, his charm completely gone. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper that held far more threat than a shout. "Listen to me, little baker." He hissed, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. "Let it go. You don't want to mess with this. It will blow up in your face, and you won't just ruin Christmas. You'll ruin everything. You need to face the consequences." His threat was designed to make me back down. But instead of fear, I felt a solidifying resolve. He was scared. He knew I had something. I met his cold gaze and gave him a smile that felt razor sharp. "I'm not letting go, Lucas. Not this time." My resolve hardened, setting a clear path to the inevitable explosive confrontation that was coming. The snow fell heavier on Christmas Eve. It wasn't the gentle, romantic snow of the start of the month. This was thick, smothering white, piling up against the window panes of the Wilson house. Inside, the house was buzzing with relatives and holiday cheer, a suffocating bubble of forced tradition. Aunts, uncles, cousins, dozens of Wilsons gathered for the annual Christmas Eve party and gift exchange. The internal tension I carried was a razor blade against the festive cheer. I moved through the crowded rooms like a ghost, exchanging strained pleasantries while watching Lucas expertly work the room, laughing loudly, presenting the picture of the successful, generous older son. My parents were subtly attentive to me, nervous energy radiating off them like heat. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know when or how spectacular the fallout would be. The moment arrived right after the final, most expensive gift, a bespoke watch, was presented to my father by Lucas. My mother, Helen, beaming, moved toward me holding a small flat box wrapped in silver paper. And last but not least, she announced to the room, her voice bright, "For our little baker from your father and me." I took the gift. It was a new apron embroidered with my initials. It was thoughtful, trivial, and utterly patronizing. The symbolism of the small, safe gift, presented just minutes after Lucas's grand gesture, snapped the last thread of my composure. I placed the box carefully on the coffee table. I took a deep breath, the rich scent of pine and expensive perfume suddenly sickening. I looked at the crowd, then found Lucas standing by the massive glowing tree, a smug, expectant look on his face. I focused my gaze on him. "Thank you, Mom. It's lovely," I said, my voice clear and carrying across the hushed, expectant room. "But there's something else I want to exchange tonight. A secret exchange, one that's been happening for months, right under the warmth of this wonderful family roof." The silence that followed was instant and total. Heads swiveled. My parents looked terrified. This was the confrontation. I felt my vulnerability rising. My hands were clammy, and a slight tremor ran through my voice, but I channeled that fear into raw courage. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the large flat-screen television my dad used for showing holiday photos, and pulled up the Millhouse deal folder. "For those of you who don't know," I continued, projecting my voice, "my grandmother, bless her memory, left the old Millhouse property to me in the Wilson Family Trust, with the express instruction that it be preserved." I gestured to the screen, which now displayed the hastily scribbled contract of sale. But it seems some members of this family felt that my grandmother's legacy and my future was better spent funding Lucas's latest artisanal real estate failure. Shock, outrage, and heartbreak rippled through the room. Whispers broke out, quickly silenced by the dramatic tension. My parents started forward. "Mia, stop this right now. This is not the time." My father hissed, his face mottled red. "When is the time, Dad? When the property is already signed over. When you've already taken my inheritance and destroyed Grandma's trust." I stood my ground, fighting through the sting of tears I refused to let fall. This wasn't about tears. It was about truth. I scrolled through the documents displaying the evidence I had collected. The financial records showing the ridiculously low valuation. The messages between Lucas and his shady partner, clearly detailing the strategy to pressure my parents and keep me quiet. I even showed the email where Lucas referred to my bakery as "that cute little hobby shop." "This is the truth," I declared, my voice trembling but steady. "Years of favoritism and manipulation culminating in a scheme to steal from your own daughter and sister. I refuse to let his charm or your guilt distract me." My mother had started crying, covering her face. My father looked utterly defeated. Lucas finally surged forward, trying to seize the remote from my hand. His face was twisted with fury. "Turning point," he sneered loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You think this is a turning point? This is you being a hysterical, jealous little girl, Mia. The Millhouse was a dump. It was a sound business decision. You don't understand business. You just bake cookies, and you just ruined Christmas for everyone." He attempted to shift blame and intimidate me, trying to use the public setting to his advantage. But I was ready. I held the remote high, my gaze direct and unflinching. "You talk about sound business, Lucas," I countered, using wit and clarity to dismantle his lies. "Your last 5 ventures have failed, plunging Mom and Dad further into debt they won't admit to. And the dump you call the Millhouse, I had a buyer offering 3 times your secret price. But you didn't ask me, did you? Because you don't respect me. You only respect what you can take." I clicked the remote one last time, projecting a final document, a notarized letter from Grandma's lawyer, which I'd obtained that morning, confirming that due to an amendment I hadn't known about, the sale was technically invalid, Without my signature a requirement, Lucas and my parents had overlooked in their haste. The room erupted in renewed chaos. Lucas's face went white. He knew he was caught. Not just caught lying, but caught failing. With a guttural sound of pure enraged impotence, he slammed his fist onto the nearest table, sending ornaments scattering, and stormed out the front door, banging shut behind him, leaving a chilling draft in the perfect holiday air. The silence returned heavier and more profound than before. I stood there catching my breath, the images of Lucas's anger and my parents' shame burning into my memory. My relatives, stunned, embarrassed, and horrified, began collecting their coats. The party was over. I looked out the window. The snow was still falling, silent and peaceful, a beautiful contrast to the destruction I had just wrought. I watched the flakes drift down, reflecting on the family I thought I had, and realized that my newfound independence, the ability to stand alone and speak the truth, was my true, hard-won strength. The immediate aftermath of the Christmas Eve confrontation was not silent, but rather a chilling, echoing void. My relatives dispersed like startled birds, embarrassed by the raw exposure of my family's secrets. The consequences began to unfold the next morning. My phone was silent from my parents. They needed time to process the wreckage I'd left behind, and frankly, so did I. The true impact, however, came from the community response. Harmony Creek was a small town, and secrets never stayed secret, especially not those aired on Christmas Eve. The locals, the people who came to my shop every day, were talking, and they were not talking about Lucas kindly. The very next day, a regular named Mrs. Henderson, a sweet elderly woman who knew my grandmother well, came into the daily grind. She didn't buy a latte, she just grasped my hand over the counter. "I'm so proud of you, Mia," she whispered. "Your grandmother would be too. Lucas tried to get me to sign something a few weeks ago saying the mill house was a hazard. I refused. I knew he was up to no good." Her words were like warm rain on scorched earth. Others followed. Subtle nods, extra-large tips, meaningful silences. Lucas's reputation suffered a swift, irreversible public shaming. His manipulations, exposed in the cold light of day, cost him the currency he valued most: community approval. The whispers I heard weren't about my hysteria, but about his entitlement and greed. The initial adrenaline rush of the confrontation faded, leaving me exhausted but strangely clear. I had spent so many years trying to be the good daughter, the easy sister, constantly minimizing my own feelings to maintain peace. Now the peace was gone, but so was the pressure. This period became a time of profound personal growth. I started to forgive myself for past vulnerability. I understood now that my worth was not defined by my family's approval or their ability to treat me fairly. Their betrayal did not define my worth. My strength lay in the courage it took to expose the truth, not in pretending the lie was reality. With Lucas gone and my parents retreating, I felt an incredible shift in my day-to-day life. I was no longer juggling expectations. I was simply managing my shop. The sense of dread that had shadowed my holiday preparations lifted. This was the resolution of subplots. I couldn't bear the thought of spending Christmas Day alone, or worse, back in that house of painful memories. So I took action. I called Zoe. I called Uncle David, who had sent me a quiet, supportive text after the confrontation. I called a few close friends I had neglected during the holiday chaos. I invited them all. My holiday preparations continued, but now they were for my definition of family. I spent Christmas morning at the bakery, not the Wilson house, baking a simple, perfect ham and assembling a massive cake. That evening, I invited loyal friends and supportive relatives to my small apartment above the daily grind. It was cozy, imperfect, and loud with genuine laughter. It was a conscious act of redefining family as chosen relationships rather than just blood. The weight of the Wilson name and its attendant expectations felt lighter than air. In the quiet hours after the impromptu gathering, as I cleaned up the remnants of wrapping paper and half-empty wine glasses, I entered a deep phase of reflection. My empowerment didn't come from getting revenge. It came from honesty and resilience. It came from embracing my own agency. The mill house was still tied up in legal maneuvers, but I was proactive. I called Grandma's lawyer, ensuring the flawed contracts were officially voided. I started the process of reorganizing my grandmother's legacy, protecting the property, not just from Lucas, but for its intended purpose, my expansion, my future. I decided I wouldn't sell it. I would bring it back to life. Just as I was about to turn in my phone, buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered a text message instead of a call. It was a single chilling sentence. It was from Lucas. "This isn't over. You just started a fight you don't know how to finish. Enjoy your pathetic little Christmas." The old Mia would have been terrified. The new Mia felt a surge of cold calm. I looked out the window at the snow covering the town, recognizing the potential threats in Lucas's promise of retaliation. But I wasn't afraid. He no longer had the power to surprise me, and more importantly, he no longer had the power to hurt me. I set my phone down, a determined smile touching my lips. I was prepared. Section 5. Denouement, énouement. 1,002 words. New Year's Day. The final holiday bookend. The harsh winds of late December had passed, leaving behind a crisp, almost hopeful clarity in the air. The legal dust was settling on the Millhouse debacle. My grandmother's lawyer, armed with my evidence, and the technicality I had found, had successfully voided Lucas's attempt to sell the property. Lucas hadn't tried to contact me again, though the silence felt less like peace and more like a paused breath before a sprint. I focused on what I could control: my life, my shop, and my chosen family. For the closing act of the holiday season, I decided to host a small party. Not at my apartment, but at the Daily Grind. It felt appropriate. The shop was the bedrock of my independence, the place Lucas had dismissively called a hobby shop. Tonight, it would be a testament to my survival and triumph. The bakery was transformed. The countertops held platters of artisanal cheeses and thick cranberry bread instead of pastries. The espresso machine was quiet, replaced by the soft sounds of acoustic music. This was a small, warm Christmas gathering with friends and supportive family members, my Uncle David and a few understanding cousins. This gathering was not about avoiding my grief, but about embracing my future. It was the resolution I needed, embodying a true sense of community and personal freedom. The air was filled with genuine connection, laughter that wasn't forced, conversations that weren't laced with subtext. In a quiet moment, I stepped away from the warmth of the group. I looked around the room, witnessing the life I had built and protected. I allowed myself a moment of emotional catharsis. I mourned the family I lost to betrayal, the parents who valued status over integrity, the brother who valued entitlement over kindness. The grief was real, a sharp, quick pain, but it was finite. It was overshadowed by the enormous sense of autonomy and clarity I gained. I didn't need the myth of the perfect Wilson family. I was freer, lighter, and more whole without it. My reflection on the entire saga was simple. True strength is rooted in resilience, self-respect, and choosing one's own family and allies. Lucas had mistaken my sensitivity for weakness. My parents had mistaken my loyalty for blindness. But every difficult phone call, every late night spent digging through emails, every moment I stood my ground had forged a new foundation for my life. Vengeance would have been fleeting. Empowerment was permanent. As the evening wound down, I stood at the large front window, watching my friends bundle up and say their goodbyes. The streetlights outside glistened on the ice patches, creating diamonds in the dark. In a final cinematic closing scene, I walked over to the front counter. I retrieved a small box of fresh beeswax candles, Grandma's favorite scent, and lit them one by one along the windowsill facing the street. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across the polished wood and warm brick of the bakery. The snow outside had begun to fall again, gently this time, a fresh, clean dusting over the town. I stood back, watching the candles glow, symbolizing hope, warmth, and triumph over manipulation. The sweet, smoky scent filled the air, replacing the faint ghosts of gingerbread and betrayal. Lucas's threat of retaliation felt distant, powerless. I looked out at the peaceful sleeping town of Harmony Creek, no longer feeling small or afraid, but large and capable. I smiled a genuine, deep smile that reached my eyes. I was empowered, free, and ready for the future. The holiday season was finally over, and Mia Wilson had won more than just a house. She had claimed herself. The bittersweet but uplifting tone closed the story, ending on a note of enduring self-possession. And so Mia closed the chapter on her betrayal, letting the quiet strength of her resilience be the final word against her family's manipulation. If this story of holiday tension and hard-won independence resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Let us know your thoughts on Mia's choices in the comments below. We read every single comment of your thoughts. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.